I think we're now officially live, Chris. So welcome everybody that is joining this LinkedIn Live today, episode 4 of Quick Step to Happier Customers. And those of you that are here that follow me, you'll know what the quick step analogy is all about. And if you don't, then I guess connect with me and follow some of my posts. But really, really excited to have my good friend who we met each other about a year ago, didn't we, Chris? And I will tell a little story in a second about the first conversation that we had. But just to sort of say that if you can spot the daffodil here, for those that are from a Welsh background, you will know that the 1st of March means it's St. David's Day. So we traditionally, it might be a leek, it might be a daffodil, it might be sort of waving a little Welsh flag. But yes, I popped out into our garden this morning just to, or should I say, hubby popped out into the garden and got a little daffodil for me. But I will, ask you to introduce yourself in a moment, Chris. But just to say that our first meeting virtually back last year, because we were both invited to be a panelist at the CX outsourcing event in Glasgow last year. But we met each other virtually first, didn't we? Can you remember that first conversation?
I remember it, yes.
When I told you off a little bit, didn't I? Would you like to tell the audience why?
Yes. And that's when I instantly liked you, Jackie, immediately.
Yes, because I'd sent you a connection invite, hadn't I, at that time? Because you're a busy guy. I know you're a busy guy. So I just said, "Oh, I noticed you haven't connected with me yet, Chris," and we got that sorted out, didn't we, very, very quickly.
We did.
But yeah, fantastic to have you on board today. But I know you describe yourself as a CX futurist, but I'm going to hand over to you, Chris, to explain to the audience what that entails.
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, Jackie, I'm so excited. Thanks for having me. I love following you on LinkedIn, and the dancing is a highlight of my Friday. So I do look forward to that on LinkedIn. So thank you so much for putting yourself out there for such a noble cause like what we're going to be talking about today with, how do we create happier customers, right? But happy to be here. My name is Chris Gillen. I do describe myself as a CX futurist because I am very passionate about the customer experience. My background, I have about 35 years in retail, working for companies like Target, Home Depot, Toys R Us. Toys R Us is global, or they used to be. They're still in some parts of the world. So I always say I was in the servitude of others in retail, and I'm very passionate about just the whole customer experience, beginning to end. And today I run a company called A Closer Look. We're based out of Atlanta, Georgia. We are a customer experience research and data analytics company. So we work with a variety of companies to help them collect customer experience data. That could be through secret shopping, mystery shopping. It could be through surveys. We work in multiple verticals. So we have a number of products. And then we have a data analytics team that helps companies kind of pull all that to get data together, and then really tries to help them figure out how to improve the customer experience holistically. So we live and breathe customer experience and customer service every day. That's why it's such a passionate topic for me.
Thank you ever so much, Chris. And I know you do lots of fantastic work. And yes, we absolutely do share that passion for service excellence. So before we get started, those of you that may be watching us right now, love to know who you are. So do pop a hello in the comments. And of course, we welcome questions as well throughout the next. We're going to try and keep it to about 5 minutes, because I know everybody is super busy, although hopefully I've got a little bit more time on it, usually on a Friday. But if you are watching this on record, then again, we'd love some feedback as well. You may not be able to ask the questions, but certainly we'd love to hear from you all the same. But to get started then Chris, I think it'd be a good place to start in terms of, practical strategies or approaches that you believe that call centers can adopt to resolve those customer issues that we all have issues from time to time where we have to contact those contact centers, but how they can resolve those issues more effectively without, in a very difficult time, I think, for most businesses now in terms of costs, with inflation, with higher prices, etc. How can they do that without incurring additional expenses?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting times, Jackie, as you know. So many things are changing on such a large scale with, how people think about consuming, how they think about shopping, how they think about the experience, what they want out of the experience. Of course, we have inflation that's happening all over the world, driving prices higher. So it's an interesting time to be in the customer service world. But I love the question you're asking because I think it's an important one, and I think before you can really start to answer that, you have to say, well, how do I resolve the conflict? Because that's really what it is. If I'm calling, more often than not, I'm calling because I have an issue, a concern, or a problem. And so, in just like in life, if you and I have an issue or a problem, we have to understand how we're going to solve it. My belief is that companies are quick to solve that problem monetarily, right? So I call with my issue and my problem, and the easiest way to satiate me, to get me off the phone or to get off that chat, is to say, we're sorry this happened to you. Here's $25, right? Please come back and see us. And I think that's been the conventional wisdom of a lot of businesses for the last 20 years, but probably even longer, right? But I don't think that's how you solve the problem. I think there's a misperception that that is what the customer wants. If I have a problem, an issue, or a concern, I just want to be compensated. And that actually is not true. I'm excited. We have a survey that we've spent the last several months doing. We've talked to almost 4,000 consumers on the topic around just customer service. We'll be publishing that in the next few weeks, Jackie. So I'll make sure you get a copy of that. But the striking thing when we were talking to all of these people, and I believe the statistic was about 81% of the people we surveyed basically said they just wanted empathy and they just wanted assurances that the problem was going to be rectified. They didn't mention compensation, money, coupons, right? They said they want to be heard. At least that's how I interpreted it. So I think this focus on being too quick to dole out money versus being quicker to actively listen and to really understand and hear what the customer is saying, empathize with that customer, because that's kind of the first thing they're looking for. They want somebody to acknowledge that the problem I had is a real problem. And two, they just want assurances. They want assurances that it's going to be handled, that it's going to be taken care of. Now, I'm going to be very clear. I'm not saying that guest recovery or appeasement is all bad. There are certainly times that you need to do that. My point is, I think we're quick to pull that trigger versus really thinking how we build emotive loyalty with that customer by simply listening to them, letting them know that it was an unacceptable experience, talking to them about what you're going to do, how the business is going to retrain, how they're going to do whatever they're going to do, and thank them for calling or thank them for reaching out. We found when we did this, because we took this approach when I took over the call centers for Toys R Us, that not only did we lower our spend pretty significantly, our net promoter scores started to go through the roof. And when we reached back out to some of those customers to ask them why, they said, you listened to me. And that's the foundation of trust. So when you think about building trust with your customer, that first starting point is actively listening to what their issues, their problems, and concerns are. And I can't overstate that enough.
Yeah, and I know we had a little chat before we came on air about this. And this is, I would describe as just basic needs that customers have. It's not about, as you quite rightly said, it's not about the next shiny new product. It's not about throwing money at customers. Yes, it will appease customers for a short period of time, but it's not, as you described, building that long-term, emotive loyalty. And you wrote a great piece on LinkedIn this week, and anybody watching this, do check it out, because I was just reading it, and it was just, I think we could 100% all relate to it, because active listening, is not easy, and there's so many things going on in our busy days. And just taking myself back to early in my career in contact centers, The challenge is often that as soon as you've got that customer's account details, you've got that information on the screen, what are we then inclined to do? We're therefore then focused on reading that information, and we're not potentially then focusing on active listening. And would you agree, Chris? There's no room for multitasking when it comes to listening.
Yeah, it's funny, Jackie. We were just having this conversation internally in my company about listening because we don't do it and we all get busy. And I think the number one issue is people believe they're really good at multitasking. They believe they can do multiple things at the same time really, really well. And the hard truth of that is you cannot. So while you're pulling up that account, whatever that customer's saying, there's a 99% chance you're not hearing what they're saying because you're focused on getting those account details up, which is why I think it's so important when you do call. One of those first things is give me a moment while I pull up your details, right? It's signaling to the customer that, hold on, I'm actually not listening right now because I'm pulling this up, and then pulling it up and saying, all right, see your details, and then open the ears and listen. And it is such a difficult thing for people to do. And I blame a lot of things, our cell phones, social media. I say, the attention span now is about 15 seconds, oddly the same amount of time a reel is on Instagram. So we've conditioned ourselves to only hear these little bits and pieces. What's fascinating about it is if you can really focus, and it does take that focus. So when you get that call and you've got those account details pulled up, you have to consciously say to yourself, I'm going into listening mode. You have to close out all other distractions and really listen to what that customer's saying, not just the problem that they're articulating, but what are they really saying? And then when I've said it, I then summarize and repeat that back to you because that's an indication to me as the consumer that you did hear what I had to say. And I venture to say, but you're a lot better at this than I am, Jackie, that when you do that and when you make that connection and that customer knows now that you're hearing them, that anxiety and that stress begins to fall. And that's that de-escalation part, I think, that goes with how do you really de-escalate a hot customer who's just really upset about something? You actively listen. You repeat what you've heard for understanding. And as you do that, you'll find that anxiety lowers. And by the way, here's the cool thing about it. This isn't just effective in the call center. This is effective in your personal life as well. So when you think about your relationship with your spouse or significant other, try this same thing too.
And I was just going to actually mention Pete because he has put a comment in to say hello to us both, and he will be sniggering in the next room. Thinking, I'm not going to ask him to rate my listening skills in a personal perspective, but you're absolutely right. And that listening then develops into empathy, doesn't it? Because you can't be empathizing with a customer if you're not actively listening. But empathy to me is not just about the phrase. Yes, there's lots of ways to demonstrate empathy verbally in terms of, I can hear your frustration, or I can sense how disappointed you are, and I'm really sorry that this has happened. But empathy for me is beyond the words, it's the actions, isn't it? You really show that you understand the customer's feelings and the customer's situation through the actions that you then demonstrate during the rest of that conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that leads us nicely into just talking a little bit more about communication, Chris, because communication, I'm sure you agree, plays such a vital role in resolving certainly complaints efficiently. But I often talk about not just the communication with the agent and the customer, but actually the importance of internal communication. Because when I was an advisor, and I know there were many times where I was frustrated, I couldn't give a customer a time scale in terms of when that complaint would be resolved, because I'm still waiting for information from another department. But there wasn't communication, effectively between us. And so, that for me was often a frustrating situation. So would you sort of, agree in terms of the importance of communication widespread within a company is so important in complaint resolution?
Yeah. The survey that I mentioned, we also asked the customer, what's their number one pain point when contacting the call center? And they said miscommunication was top of the list, number one. I forgot the actual percentage, but it was super high. And how I interpret that is, yes, you're right. The first stage is, are you listening to me, agent, right? Frontline agent. That's, are we understanding each other? But it complicates the situation when whatever that issue is, you now have to push that call over to somebody else, right? And now somebody else takes it on. What's the fluidity between what you're passing to that person, what you've just heard, and how do you avoid those issues where the customer then, I've had a wonderful conversation with you, Jackie, we understand each other. Now you've had to pass me to Bob, and I have to repeat everything that I just said to Bob, and I now have to reestablish whether Bob is really hearing my issue or not. That's really what the consumer is suggesting when they say miscommunication. Yes, it could be the first interaction I'm making, but what compounds that is exactly what you're saying. You can't do what you need to do because you're waiting on 4 or 5 other people to bring it together, and you may not have control in that situation. And how frustrating is that when you have to tell the customer, well, I'd like to help you, but I can't because I'm waiting on this. So that you're 100% correct. It's not just the communication between you and the consumer or the customer. It's also what's happening behind the scenes internally. I just had a real world experience yesterday where I got charged for something. I was like, I don't need that service anymore. I called. The lady was perfect. She answered really nice. I connected. We were laughing, and she said, let me kick you over to somebody else. And I said, okay. She goes, I can't handle it. I got to get you the subscription people. And then that person came on, a very nice person, but they had no idea what my issue was. They had no idea why I had been transferred in. And I had to go through the whole process again. And so think about that for a minute. Even though they took care of my situation, they did, we got it resolved. I'm still not leaving feeling great about that organization. I had an issue. I wanted to be able to resolve it quickly, efficiently. I got punted around. There were communication issues there. So the likelihood, even though you resolved my issue, of me ever using that business again is super low. I probably won't because it was just too much of a hurdle. So communication is paramount in the organization all the way around. You've got to connect with all of your departments. You got to make, I usually like to use the word fluidity between those departments because it's got to flow nicely. We understand you may not be able to handle, certain things. They have to be escalated or they have to go to a different department. But how that's being transferred, the nuance of that, what information is being passed, and then how does that secondary agent, that level 2 or level 3 agent, enter the conversation in a way that I don't erode the trust and the communication that was already established.
Yeah, there's 2 key things there, incorporating what you've just said there, Chris. It's the transfer process. Mm-hmm. And, if there's one thing that I would, ask all companies to try their best to achieve is an internal warm transfer process where an advisor can actually speak to the person that they're going to transfer that call through to, and reassure the customer that the information they've provided will be relayed to that person. Mm-hmm. So the second person in that conversation is not going to answer that phone by saying, how may I help? Haven't we all been there? Yeah. And you take a deep breath and you think, right, okay, I've got to go through this again. And the important thing there, going back to you were talking about listening earlier, Chris, and the importance of summarizing back. In that context, mm-hmm. that first agent, the importance of summarizing back, because our brains are absorbing lots of information every second of every day through our 5 senses. So it's not just our listening. If we've got our eyes open, we're taking information visually as well. So our brain will filter. Mm-hmm. So it might delete some information. It might distort that information slightly. It might make assumptions. And so the only way we can be certain that we've interpreted what the customer has said in order to pass that information on correctly, to ensure that we haven't deleted any important information or made any assumptions, is that summary back.
That's right.
And then waiting for that customer to then say, yeah, absolutely, that's the issue. And we can then confidently transfer that call through, having spoken to the next person and relayed that, not just the customer's name, but an accurate understanding of what the issue is. And
Yeah.
without that summarizing back,
Yeah.
particularly in that context, how on earth do we know that we've relayed that information correctly to the next person?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was brilliant. It was perfect. And when you do that, it just creates such a different experience for the customer. I can't tell you because I've also been on the other side where I've been transferred, and then the next person that picked up the phone, said, "Hi, Mr. Gillen. I heard you had this issue, or I heard we need to do this. My name's so and so. I'm here to take care of it." Oh, wow. Like, okay, I don't have to repeat myself. I don't have to tell you. That's a great experience. I've been heard. And the communication has flowed through. And so when you talk about really creating an exceptional customer experience, those little things matter immensely.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And Peter's just put a comment in to say, our John Lewis scenario being bounced around. We had a reset. I won't go into details. I did post about it, but yeah, we were very much
Yeah,
bounced around department. Nobody wanted to take
yeah,
ownership. But I
right.
would at this point, before we go any further, just to welcome, if there's anybody else that's joined us, please do let us know that you're here so we can say hi. And of course, we welcome questions as well. But the next question I think is worthwhile discussing, Chris. Now, you're more of a technology expert than I am. I'm very much about people skills and
Yeah.
behaviors. But I'd be interested to know your perspective in terms of, are there any specific tools, technologies that can help businesses to streamline that resolution process and, of course, improve customer satisfaction without necessarily having a great impact on cost? A
Yeah.
challenge there, I'm guessing.
Yeah. It's such a fascinating time right now in the world. What's going on? Everybody, I mean, you can't open a newspaper, you can't go online and read anything without hearing the word artificial intelligence. It's all over everything that we're doing, and it's just right. I wrote a paper not too long ago about comparing what we're going through right now to what happened in the 1800s with the evolution of the steam engine, and how the steam engine revolutionized everything. I mean, talk about a disruptive tool, and you think it's a steam engine. Yeah, but when it was introduced back then, it disrupted industries. It advanced business, commerce, consumerism on a massive scale. We're witnessing that same thing right now. It's fascinating. And listen, anybody claiming to be an artificial intelligence expert is probably not an expert, because I don't know how you could be as fast as this technology is just evolving. Every day you wake up, something new. And so, and I'm sure all of your listeners are keeping up on this. A lot of talk about what AI is going to do, how it's going to disrupt, it's going to take people's jobs. I don't believe that at all. I think it's enhancing jobs, right? It's eliminating the mundane work that nobody really wants to do anyway. And I think what it will do is it will allow people to begin to become more creative, more empathetic, right? So less about pushing buttons and filling in boxes, more about that connection. And we're starting to see some things emerge with AI. Jackie, you mentioned you and I met at CXO last year in Scotland, and this year it's in May in Atlanta. I believe it's May 1st and 2nd, and I'm going to be speaking on this topic again. And I say that to tell you where I think call centers should really be focused on right now is, how do I implement generative AI into my business model from an enhancement perspective. There was a great article that's been getting kicked around on LinkedIn about the company Klarna implementing AI, and AI doing the work of like 700 people. And
Wow.
that's not layoff people. That's just how much volume this bot potentially can handle. And that's good news, right? Because it's handling all this stuff that a human is just kind of wasting time on to a certain extent, and allowing us to use more of those powers of empathy, powers of communication, trust building, rapport building at a different level. And I think that's what call centers are really going to see. This concept of a plug and play. How do I plug up an artificially intelligent bot to handle low level, mundane kind of tasks? How do I then build level 2, level 3 care levels on top of that? What does it, so it's a whole new world, I guess is what I'm saying when it comes. So there are so many tools out there right now. And the last 6 months, Jackie, I've been looking, watching, reaching out, and having some correspondence with a lot of these startup companies using AI in some capacity, and it is fascinating what's out there and what's coming. So I would say call centers right now should be heavily invested in looking at all the tools and the technology that's out there. More importantly, strategizing and having a vision for how AI is going to kind of plug into the call center. Because if you're not thinking about that now, you're going to be outpaced by your competitors.
Yes.
And so it's really important. And even if you're in a situation where maybe you're a medium sized or a smaller sized business, you don't have the resources, you don't have the money. There's a lot of people out there who can help. They can, there's a lot of consultation, help you map out a strategy, introduce you to some tools, things of that nature. I'm always happy to help people, point them in the direction of those things that they're looking at as well. But this is a time of discovery. And I said something to a friend the other day that if you're a leader and you have a C in your title, that C better stand for curiosity right now, because you better be out there looking at all of these tools and things that are rapidly coming up to make sure you understand where, if at all, they fit into your business, and more importantly, you don't get left behind because you're not looking at that.
I'm loving that curiosity element, Chris. And are you happy if anybody's watching this either live now or on the recording, if they've got any questions or want to find out more about what tools are available, are you happy for people to get in touch with you, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been looking at some just really cool stuff. Where I'm most excited, I don't want to go off too far off topic, Jackie, but you did get me talking about this. So
Deliberate.
what I'm fascinated in is all the technology that's driving language, right? So when you think about one of the most difficult things in the call center today is just, what I would consider to be miscommunication around dialect, accents. I don't quite understand you if you have a Jamaican accent, if you have some of these kind of things. And so there's always that element, right, that you have to, especially if you're on the business side of things, you're thinking about where can I put my business where I'm going to have, whatever language it's in, the right level of people speaking. There's some fascinating tools that are coming that are just revolutionizing language, whether that's smoothing out accents to kind of smooth out the call a little bit, to make it a little more nuanced depending on the region that you're talking to. This thinking, you think about in a call center. When I was going to RFPs for call center, language was always big because typically we had multiple languages. So we were looking at people that spoke French and German and some other things. And that can be really challenging in an offshore kind of setting. And so that always became a deal. But imagine a technology now that it doesn't matter what language you speak, because when you speak into it, it translates automatically into that language. And when they speak back, it automatically translates to you and does it with perfection.
Wow.
That's wild stuff to me.
Yeah.
And so there's multitude of things like that coming. So keep your finger on the pulse. Make sure you're for call centers, you're investing time into actually being out there and looking at what's coming.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's such an exciting time. I started my career in contact centers 30 odd years ago. I'll say that quickly. But even some of the things you just talked about there, if only AI had existed back then, when I didn't have to spend
Right.
minutes after every call summarizing that conversation, if all that could have been taken away from me, and I could actually spend time doing what I absolutely loved, which was speaking to customers,
Yes.
and resolving their issues. But of course, it's really important as well that the agents of the future receive the right training as well, so they feel comfortable and confident in working with AI tools in order to deliver, a great service to the customer. Because we don't want, our advisors to feel that they're unsupported, and we certainly don't want customers to feel that they're getting, a reduced level of service because of that lack of training or that lack of confidence.
Yeah, that's right.
So, we are coming up to around the 30-minute mark, Chris, but I would love to squeeze in another question if you're happy to. So just to sort of finish off, I guess, in your experience, what are some of the common mistakes when it comes to handling customer issues that could be avoided by contact centers with the right approach or the right mindset. So, if you were going to come up with your top 2 or 3 actions that contact centers could take away from this LinkedIn Live today and put into action, what would they be?
Well, I think the first one is going to be near and dear to your heart, because it's all about training. And I think it's the number one mistake that call centers make. And I know that most of them have a great selection process and how they go out and select candidates, and how they train them and how they nest them and how they put them out on the floor. But that doesn't mean that the training that's being delivered is the right training. And I see too many issues and too many problems that are created when call centers are really not investing in the agent's training. And I mean that from whatever client they're serving as well, right? It doesn't matter, every client's a little bit different in terms of their training regimen, what they want. I get all of that, but making sure that you are training, really training your frontline, all levels of care, quite honestly, on how to properly handle issues and to solve them themselves. Because the second thing would be, if I've trained you properly, I should be able to empower you now to handle those issues. Because first call resolution was a huge metric that it was really important to me, because my thought was less about the niceties of how was your day, how was the weather, and more how efficiently, right, clinically almost, can we solve your issue. Because we believe that you didn't necessarily want to have a 30-minute conversation with us about the weather and our families. You're calling, you want your problem solved as quickly, as efficiently, and as friendly as possible. So first call resolution was issued. So to achieve that, what we had to do was really start looking at, well, what causes a call not to be resolved on the first contact. And then we began to kind of work backwards to say, okay, how do we begin to pull some of those issues so that we could get more calls handled by the first agent that they contacted. And so that's that training. They have to be well trained, right? They have to have access to all of the information they need and present it in a way that's quick, easy, and efficient for them to answer your question. And then they have to be empowered to make decisions. So yes, I have a script, I know what I need to do, but there's got to be some latitude either way if you really want to drive that first call resolution rate. So for me, I wish I could tell you that, they could go out and put this technology in, and they can do this and they can do that. And there's certainly some things that'll help, but there is no substitute for investing in your people, training the heck out of them, give them all the tools and resources to be successful, and create a great culture to nurture them. When you do that, you'll see a noticeable change in how your customer feels about that process. And you haven't really changed anything. You've just invested in that love and care and feeding of your people, who then take that to the customer. And so it's a bit of a trickle down effect.
Yeah, you're definitely, no surprise there, Chris, going to get any argument from me on on that one. Look, I've had a fantastic 30 minutes or so on a Friday. It's always good to include a lot of positivity and things we enjoy doing on a Friday, and this is one of them, Chris. So it's been absolutely fantastic. And again, I know it's quite early in the morning for yourself. So I do really appreciate you giving up the time. I'm guessing you've got a very busy day ahead of you. But just to let the audience know that the next LinkedIn Live is in 3 weeks due to work commitments. Dare I say, I'm working on Fridays, doing in the next couple of weeks, delivering some training. But I'm back on the 22nd of March, I think it is, with somebody I think that you know very well, Chris, and that's our friend Simon Chris.
Oh, well, you're going to get a good education in all things AI, because I will tell you, there's not many experts out there, but that guy knows his stuff. So that'll be a great session.
It certainly does. And I feel very honored that he's given up his time to do it, because I think it'll be about 9 p.m. on a Friday evening for him.
So Jackie, you really make your guests work. Simon's got to stay up late. It's 6 a.m. here in Atlanta. It's still dark outside.
I certainly do. But yes, those of you that may not know Simon Chris, hopefully you all do. But he is Australia's leading voice on AI. So if AI is something, we've dipped into it today. But if AI is a topic that you want to learn more about, make sure that you do register for the 22nd of March, because that's going to be a super exciting one. But look, Chris, I'm going to leave you get on with your very busy day, but thank you ever so much. It's been so interesting talking to you. And as I say, it's always a pleasure talking to somebody who shares the same passion in terms of delivering great service.
Thanks so much for having me. And everybody go to Turn a Corner. Wait, I'm trying to get there we go. Turn a Corner. Check it out.
Thank you ever so much, Chris. And Peter's just put a message in to say very insightful. So yes, anybody else that's with us, if you do want to put a comment in either now or after the session, just to let us know how you found it. And of course, any last minute questions that we can then get back to you personally.
Thanks so much, Jackie.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.